Okay, our 5 minutes are up. I'm back to recording. I had some interesting questions offered, presented at the break, and let's see. I'm going to try to address them, but what I'm going to do before I address them is actually start a brand new, because I had so many different projects opened up. I'm just going to put up a new one and go back to this tutorial that I sort of wanted to cover. So I'm going to start back up here again with a brand new project that's not all messed up with all the other stuff that I've looked at. So I'm going to go create and single view application. And actually, this is not bad to just go over this 100 times because eventually you're going to just do it by, like, you know, just click and click and click and it'll be open. You'll learn how to create a new app. Hello test. I'm going to call this one hello test. And this one's going to use the storyboard. It's going to be universal, and it's going to use automatic reference counting, which is what the tutorial is actually. So what you're doing is you're going to get a tutorial preview. When I open it up, that's what I wanted. I get a, how did I get my object? I was using an object. How do I get my search bar? Here's my search bar. File templates. Hold on one second.
You gotta click the little square up.
No.
No, just.
Oh, it's this one.
Next one over. Nope.
No, that's this one. This one, yeah. There we go. Yeah, object library. You have to understand, I was teaching, yesterday I was doing object, I was doing Android, preparing stuff for a weekend Android class. Oh my god, what program am I in? Okay, here I am, I'm back to normal. If, for example, you had the same problem I just had a few minutes ago, let me show you. Let me just continue, because somebody asked about frameworks, APIs, and I just asked myself about how do I get that object to come up. We have, unfortunately, a bunch of, and I'll zoom in here a little bit so you can see what I'm talking about. We have a bunch of little stuff everywhere. There's so much stuff to click on in this interface. We have the canvas. I call it a canvas. It's the center. When you click on the storyboards, whether you're in if you're in the single view, click on the XIB file, you get the canvas that shows up. On the canvas, you're dragging and dropping stuff from the library. And where do you get the library stuff? You get that from the lower corner over here. And unfortunately, in order to find stuff in here, unless you have good eyes, you can make it bigger. Hello. You can make it smaller. Unfortunately, I don't like to mess around with it because then I lose it. I go, where's the rest of the screen? Because when you push this up this way, what ends up happening is the rest of the interface has gone away, and I'm going, where's the other options that I wanted to pick? But the interesting part about the library is that this is where you're going to get all of the components that you're going to drag and drop and put on your canvas. So in order to change the view, you've got the buttons up here. So as I mentioned before, we have the file template libraries, code snippet libraries, and this one here is going to be the objects. Everything we stick in an object-oriented program is an object. So everything is treated like an object. And unfortunately, we have to scroll through the list, but most people end up using this little search bar at the bottom. So as an example, if I type in button, I should get some button combinations that come up. And where's my button? Here's round rectangular button. So the way I get stuff from the library onto the canvas is I drag and drop it. So go ahead and drag and drop some stuff, and you'll see what I'm talking about. In fact, I'm going to deviate again from the tutorial just to show you some different items that might be in here. As an example, segmented control. We have first and second buttons and things. I just put a button out here. If I click on the button, double click on the button, I can change the label. I'm going to call this one here my button. If I click on the item over here, I can change the properties on the left-hand side, as I mentioned before. So if you drag this thing all the way up so you can see the whole library in one view, and then you're going to drag it back down eventually, which is why I don't mess with it. What I normally would do, though, is take this and stretch it out this way, because it makes things bigger. Unfortunately, though, it's very small. Yes?
You can collapse things.
You can collapse it, yeah. In fact, you could take it away if you want and have the whole screen.
The individual.
You can collapse the individual stuff, too. You have these little bars up here, as he was mentioning, and make it smaller this way. Unfortunately, I end up coming back like this, and I go, where is everything? And then I gotta go back and I gotta put it back. There should just be one button that says default. Reset everything to defaults. Otherwise, it's just, where is everything? Okay, so I'm gonna just put everything back. Huh?
It's all intuitive.
Hey. Anyway, I'm not a fan of all the buttons. And then you have buttons up here as well, too. So, in the old days, this all was separated out. And it was called the interface builder, and it wasn't merged. And we had fewer buttons. And we had a whole other program that came up that had all these buttons and options on it. So they took that whole program and this whole program, they merged it together, now we got twice as many buttons. Long story short. Anyway, so the way that you get things onto the canvas is you have to drag and drop them. In the Android market, you can do it programmatically. iPhone, you can't. You gotta drag and drop. In the old days, actually, you used to be able to do things programmatically. You can't in this version. Well, you can, sort of, if it's more difficult, it's easier to drag and drop from the library. So make sure you put a button and you put a label. All of the other stuff, in fact, you can just type in label. You're going to get a UI label. Put a button and a label out there. Because we're going to click the button and change the label, which I believe is what this tutorial is going to do. Let me just take a quick peek. All right. So let's see. Expand the view controller. Let me try to press button first. Yeah, we got a button and we got a label. So drag a label and a round rectangular button, put it on the canvas. Put click me on the button if you want. Now connect it to the source. So I'm going to make my view a little bit more presentable, so I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to click this guy over here, get rid of the side margin. So now if I click on the item, and I click on the little tuxedo editor on the top here, I'm going to see the source code that's related to the item. So let me talk about model view controller, everybody's favorite topic. But before I do that, let me answer your question because I'm going to forget your question if I don't answer it right now. At the break, somebody asked, well, how do you know what libraries are in there? How do you know what APIs are you're using in frameworks and all that other stuff? This is the basic package you get. This is the basic Hello World template. If you click on the project over here on the left-hand side, you get yet another set of interface tools to work with. Let me make this smaller so you can see what I'm talking about. It ends up in the middle of the screen. This is where you can drag and you can put icons in here for the program. So if it's an iPad, you could put a Retina icon in there, a non-Retina one, iPad, iPhone icons. And these are the icons that are going to show up, on the device, so you can press the icon. You can put splash screens in here, all sorts of different things you're going to add to the screen. You can also change the default orientation of the screen. So when it comes up, it's in portrait mode or in landscape mode. And also in here, you can click on what's called build settings. And you can see packaging, and you can see deployment, you can see other options in here to change the name, the information, build phases. In here you can see linked libraries. By default, we have in this project Foundation, Core Graphics, and UI Kit, which is going to give us, and these are what's called frameworks. So if we press on this, is the worst part about this entire interface. You got to look everywhere because there's always something to click on. Here's this itsy bitsy little plus. You click on the plus, it brings up all the other frameworks. So the way that you include an API, which is AKA a framework, into the package, API stands for Application Programming Interface. Framework is the equivalent to it, but it's the package concept where you're getting a bunch of utilities and a bunch of libraries that you can make objects of inside of your program to add more functionality to your program. So as an example, the Facebook framework will add in connectivity to update, to retrieve information. We have audio, video, tons of framework for that, and we'll see that actually next week probably. Probably the following week. Depends on how fast I talk. But here's an example. We can click on Audio Toolkit and select Add. Now I have Audio Toolkit in here. What am I going to do with it? Nothing. not going to use it tonight, but and I can see it up here. I've added the Audio Toolkit framework, and I look at the headers, and what do I get? All the precompiled headers for, and if you're in the Objective-C class, that makes sense too. All of the header files for the precompiled objects that are now included in this project. If I want to make an instance of an object that's going to use audio, I can say, as an example, if I put the M player in here, and M player is one of them that will do, it's M player actually. I can, you know, bring up a little box that plays a video or plays an audio or something. And I can make instances, and we'll see this, not tonight, but we'll see this as we go through the course within the next 5 weeks actually, how to add something into the project, make an instance of the object, put the object on the canvas, make it work. And so a lot of what you're doing with a lot of the apps that you're building is third-party stuff. When I say third-party stuff, it's MPlayer's not made by Apple. Audio stuff's not made by Apple. All these codecs, all of these translators, all of the video stuff, Facebook integration. I keep saying that, but there's one for LinkedIn. There's one for, you know, I can't remember right now, but there's a ton of other, and these are called frameworks. So I'll have an entire night where we just look at frameworks and build a bunch of apps with frameworks. So that's how you get other stuff in there. I'm going to leave that in here. Maybe, hopefully I won't regret it. And instead I'm going to click back here on the storyboard. I'm going to talk about model view controller for a minute, because it goes without saying there's a method to this madness. There's a way of actually making this work correctly and logically. So we have what's called a view. We have a model, and we have this is the view, I'm sorry, and we have a controller for the view, adequately labeled view controller. So this is the view. So model view controller is Smalltalk. It dates back to Smalltalk. And as I mentioned before, Objective-C is based on Smalltalk. So it uses a model view controller concept. What is this? Textbook definition. It's a design pattern. All iOS apps follow this design pattern. All of the templates follow this design pattern. What does it mean? There's a view. There's always a view. And the view, this is the view you're looking at it. Our case, we decided to use a storyboard view. You may have used an XIB view. XIB is another clarification. This is an XIB. It's in a storyboard. I can decide to use a storyboard or not use a storyboard. I'm still using XIB, which is an interface builder file, which is the file type. So sometimes you can take these files and import them into the project. Actually, you could drag and drop them into the project. So you could take other people's XIB files or XIB files from other projects, drop them in. XIB is XIB. It works in any project you want. So you can reuse components and stuff like that. But anyway, long story short, this is the view. What's the model? Model is the data. In the old days, no, well, okay, some people still follow the app delegate, some people don't. Data, what's data? Variables, program, logic, algorithms, control, not the view control, but the logic behind it. So sometimes you can take the data and mix it in with the view controller and not use it at all. In fact, we're not going to use the app delegate. But app delegate is more like the delegator of the data exchange and the sharing of the data. This all comes in sets. So if we have a view, we have a view controller. And we have another view, and we have another view controller. So as an example, if I went here, File, New, and I loaded up, let's go File. You don't have to do this. User interface view. Next. What I want to, oh, let's do it for the iPhone family. Next. Call it view, put it in here. I just added another view, and I got an XIB in here. And then I didn't actually add a controller for it, which is kind of sloppy. And this worked this way because I have a storyboard, which means I just want to put a view in here, which is not very common for what you'd want to do, unless you had something that was going to be like for error checking. So as an example, it ended the storyboard. You got out of the storyboard, because if you're going to use storyboard, you're going to put everything inside of the storyboard. You're not going to just put a view out there. But if it crashes and you can put up this view that says, hey, crashed, press this button to send this information to Microsoft or something. And then it's kind of like a defaulto, exit it out of the loop, you're exit out of the program, you're not in the storyboard anymore, but this view comes up. That's the view. That's how you're going to get it. And there's no controller for it because it's just an orphan view that's out there on its own. Views come in controller sets, so we have what's called a view controller. So if I click on this storyboard over here and I click on it and I go to press the editor button, I get the view controller. That's the default one view controller for the entire storyboard. This is why people like storyboards. In non-storyboard and XIB sets, when you're not using the storyboard and you add a new view in there, and we're going to see that next week, we'll add more views to something. And we have view controller A, view controller B, view controller C, view A, view B, view C. Then you got it all out here. And you have a separate view controller for each view because that's the design pattern. And what is the view? The controller controls the view just as it says. And it has the interface to the view. So here we have a interface. We also have one, in fact I'm just going to leave this one here, we don't really need it. But here's my view controller. Here, actually let me just put this guy out here. I put him in my headers folder. No, it's not going to like that. No, I didn't. Here, let me just delete it. Alright, got that view out of there. So we have a view controller.h and we have a view controller.m. And when I click on them, I see them side by side because I clicked on them. So this is the most confusing part. And if you want to see the storyboard again, just click on the storyboard and it'll come back and it'll shift over to the right and rotate. But what we have now is the same concept that I was going over earlier, which is why some people are taking the Objective-C course. Because what's an interface? What's an interface? What's an implementation? And the interesting thing is they made this for dummies. We've got two interfaces and they're both in two different files. We see this default interface up here and then we see the interface over here. And this is for people who, I should say, coding for dummies. People who don't get the concept right and they don't put everything over here, then they can always add it over here. What do I mean by adding? You're going to hold that question for 1 second because I might answer it for you. In the interface, you're defining all of the components that you're going to use. In the implementation, you're writing the source code for all of the methods. Okay, ask the question.
Is view and controller one-to-one mapping or multiple views can have one controller? That
One-to-one mapping.
I'm just asking. Is it?
It should be one-to-one mapping. A lot of people don't do that. As I mentioned before, this is a design pattern, not a strict requirement. As you saw, I just put a view in there. I had no controller. Yeah. I can make that other controller control that view. But theoretically, if you're following model view controller, all the data is in the model. All the views, your screen, your controller is one controller for each view. It's a one-to-one mapping. It's a very good question, actually. They come in sets. So you have view controller A.h, view controller A.m, view A, or view, my view, and then you have another view with another set of .h and .m. When you go into a project, I'm not going to do it right now, but if you go into a new project, and you just add another view to it, another interface to it, you're going to get the interface and you're going to get the .h and the .m to go with it. So you're going to get the view controller and you're going to get the view. Why? Because the view controller is supposed to be controlling the view, and the data is supposed to be shared among all the different views. And you don't have a main, and you don't have, you don't have the same kind of environment as you have in other types of programs. But in a nutshell, and that was a really quick definition of it. If you go through one of those books and you look up Model View Controller, you'll see about 30 or 40 pages of definitions of what that is. It's a design pattern. It's a way of separating out the project into different components so you can easily organize your work. Yeah?
So there can be a single model for several views.
Oh yeah, you only have one set of app delegates. App delegate is going to delegate who's got control, when, and what data they're using.
So it's a special kind of thing.
Yeah, we're not going to actually, it's kind of old-fashioned. I don't like using app delegate. I use it for, we'll see it when we look at protocols and we look at some of the interface stuff. For the most part, I put everything in the view controller. not the best design method, but people, okay, so it's like people have different programming styles. Some programmers will make, obviously, some programmers will make more classes than other ones. They'll divide things out into minute little details. Some programmers will use inheritance correctly. They'll, the whole, you can tell, what kind of training they've had by looking at the source code. I take the shortcut because I'm lazy. I don't create as many, I know my faults. I don't create as many classes as I probably should. I cram everything, and which is the typical stuff, because it's laziness. I know what I'm supposed to do, I just don't do it that way. It's kind of like when you write a research paper, you're supposed to have introduction, you're supposed to have, thesis statement, all. But who does that? Just put it together, make it work, and it works. But still, maybe one is readable, the other one's not readable. So the complaints that I get is I cram everything into one file. I put everything in the view controller, and I don't use data correctly. Well, in habit. Yeah, correct.
So your storyboard right now has just one screen on it, but you showed us ones where there are a whole bunch of different screens.
Yeah.
Every single one of those additional screens needs to have its own view
Nope,
controller?
it all
No.
shares the same.
Okay, so you can have as bunch of.
That's why people like the storyboard.
Controller.
The storyboard is controlling all the interface between all the different screens. Lovely. This is something brand new. This never existed prior to maybe a year ago. All my old examples don't have storyboards in them.
So you could write a whole program and get away with just that stuff that's right
One
there.
view, that's why I love it. Well, because as I mentioned before, I like to cram everything all in one file. You just give me one storyboard, I'll put everything inside the storyboard. Yeah?
So just to be clear then,
Yeah.
the storyboard is more than just a design representation. That gets carried through to runtime
Yeah.
and acts programmatically.
Yeah.
Okay.
Dynamically, too. So when you click on something, it's inside of the storyboard. You have control. You have a main controller, and we'll see this when we look at tabbed. We have tab controls. We have list boxes. We can nest a view inside of a view. We can take one view and compound it, change the view dynamic. Everything can be changed dynamically. It can be populated with content that's from from another source, which we'll see. Go out to the internet, grab some stuff, stick it in a view. Who knows what it's going to look like? In fact, that's the thing with that app you showed me. I didn't recognize it. It's because the content changed on the internet. That app goes out to an internet website, and the stuff's different. I looked at it and I went, "Oh, that looks cool. What's that?" And it's your app. I'm like, "What?" Well, because it's changed. And that's the beauty of the dynamic behavior. It's not stuck in a static, Like in the old days when you used to program something, it was, okay, it runs like that. I'll recompile it, change it. No. Now everything just evolves naturally, which is great. Especially if you use internet content, which is why people like to use the internet. And in fact, there's this new trend now, and we're going to see it probably next week, actually, where you have your mobile. Well, everyone, web development, so you have your website, right? And then you have your mobile website. So if you're on a mobile phone, well, now you have your mobile app website, which is really an app, but it's running from a website. But it looks like an app because you got your Sencha, Cocoa-Touch extension libraries, actually all written in JavaScript. You stick it out there on the internet, looks like an iPhone app. And all your iPhone is doing is going to this URL and loading the content and putting it into your app. And you can supplement it with controls inside of the app. So you have a hybrid. You have a website app that people can go to from any device. So all this talk about, you were talking earlier about all these interfaces for multi-platform compatibility. If you don't want to spend hours and hours and hours of labor trying to learn these third-party tools, which are worse than Xcode, then you go the mobile app, web app route. You create one app, and you create a shell for every single one of your platforms. A shell takes you 5 minutes. It's like creating Hello World. You drag a web view, you stick it on the canvas, you put an icon on it, you label it your app. It goes out to the internet. Every phone's got internet access. You can't get away. Everything's got it. So you're not going to run into a problem, no access. So, in fact, there's a ton of apps that are working this way. Same app works on thousands of different devices. Who knows what device it's going to be. All it's doing is it's acting as a front end. It's going out, maybe providing a password, because maybe you want to make sure people pay for this thing. So you have a login that happens through the app, username, password. goes out there, grabs the content from the internet, populates the app with it. And there's nothing in the app. It's a shell that you can create in 5 minutes. And then you get the same app that runs on hundreds, thousands of different devices. As long as you create a shell for it. And you stick it in each one of the different stores, and voila. And you change the app, you change it all on the website. So all your apps are updated automatically for you. Because they're all going to the same website. They're all pulling the same data. It's like web development. Which is actually kind of cool. And I think that's a better route, personally. In fact, I have an app, actually. I'll show you, not for a couple weeks, because we have to get into data, JSON and data stuff. JSON is a third-party API, or is a toolkit, runs on top of JavaScript. Well, not really, Java embedded. But long story short, it's a little bit detailed for the first night of class. I can't show it to you, but it goes out and pulls data from, it does an SQL query on a MySQL database, pulls data back, transfers stuff around, files around, JSON can do tons of stuff. In fact, it's a great way of taking information from the app, bringing it out to the web, taking data from the web. It's a data exchange API framework that helps you move stuff back and forth. A lot of people don't even bother with that. They'll use a PHP script. In fact, you could put the PHP script in the app. And then it goes and runs the script. What does the script do? Well, PHP does everything, right? So queries the MySQL database, takes the information back, populates it into a form, does a shopping cart, the whole entire purchase is done through the app, which is really controlled on a website. Doesn't it have to be controlled on the website anyway? How else are you going to get it to the company? So you just start stacking more stuff on the website and make the app thinner and thinner. What do you get? You get a faster running app. It's easier to maintain and upgrade. That works on every platform. The only catch to that is in remote areas when you don't have Wi-Fi access. Well, you got 3G. What if you don't have 3G? You don't have 3G, you don't have Wi-Fi access, your app's pretty dead. So a lot of people do, in fact, if you go, I have that actually in one of those apps you were looking at in that section, there's a default page you can stick up instead that says, I'm sorry, the app is not available for you right now. You must turn on your Wi-Fi. So you don't get this blank looking, oh, it's broken screen. You get this pleasant little commentary screen that comes up and says, hey, we've detected an issue. And it looks like a real app actually can't load instead of, we don't have internet access. But there's tons of different ways, and then there's tons of different libraries, so you go out and you say, oh, it looks like an iPhone. Well, that's because there's touch interface libraries, so the buttons look like, and the sliders and all of the GUI components look like they came from an iPhone. But you're going to www.something, and it loads up. That's what I call the non-native, easy app development. I'll show you that, but that's not native app. Well, it is native app development, but it's not using any of those third-party tools. So what do the third-party tools do? Unfortunately, and that's probably a good thing that I don't remember any of the names, because then I won't be accused of bashing anything, but they give you an interface, usually some sort of a development environment, that allows you to drag and drop and stick stuff on a canvas. Most of the stuff's in HTML, JavaScript, it's in something that's translatable, XML sometimes. Then there's a parser that takes all that stuff you put together, creates an app out of that. And the parser is used to create an app for the iPhone, for the Android, for the BlackBerry. So they advertise this thing as a multi-platform compatible, but you're not programming in Java, you're not programming in Objective-C, you're not using Xcode, you may not even be using a Mac for it. You're just using somebody else's tool that acts as a front end to a parser. It's like working with a fourth generation programming language that's going to do all the translation for you. Only problem is that sometimes they're lacking the support for some particular frameworks, or they're lacking in their ability to manage the memory properly. As I mentioned before at the beginning of tonight, everything's dynamic here. that app's not necessarily going to be running in a dynamic fashion. It's going to be preset. The one you made with that third-party tool, you're not going to get the same performance out of it. Which means it's going to have to already think, oh, what happens about this? Okay, this. What happens about that? Okay, this doesn't here. It has to think too much because it's not a native app. So what we're learning in this workshop is what I call native app development, which means you're writing in the tools that are supposed to be used by the distributor of the hardware. That is more true to the functionality of the hardware. Non-native apps, you're building with third-party APIs that are wrappers on top of the native code. And whatever you're writing is going to be translated into native code. Are you going to trust the translation? Depends on how sophisticated the app is. Is it going to have all of the features of the native underlying platform? Maybe, maybe not. Is it going to be easier to learn than the Xcode native app? Probably not. Some of them are really easy. Actually, PhoneGap is probably the most easiest way of doing it. For those people who just can't stand programming, PhoneGap is like putting together a website. In fact, you don't even need Xcode for it. You take your HTML and your JavaScript files, you put them in a directory, you upload it to the PhoneGap site, and it downloads an APK file for you. And you download an APK. Here's your app. It's the same thing as taking a web view, dragging it over to the canvas, and loading your app inside of the web view. But people don't want to do that. People want to take the easy way out. Unfortunately, there's no jobs in the easy way out. You have to know what you're doing in order to get a decent job in this area. Most people want jobs. All right, let's go back to model view controller. I was on a tangent. Sorry about that. To limit my tangents, otherwise I'm going to run out of time. View controller over here. So the view controller.h, as I mentioned before, works with the view controller.m, and it's the controller for the view, which means all of the GUI components are wired to it. And they actually call it wiring. In the old days, they called it anchoring. And I don't know if I'm not the only one who calls it wiring. There's other people that call it wiring, but I wire the controls. So how do you wire the controls? You drag and drop. And so you're dragging and dropping from the beginning of the at to the end of the at. And I didn't mention the at symbol in the previous class, and I'll try and mention it next time. But for you guys who want to know what you need to know what the at symbol means, it's really called an at directive, which means you're telling the compiler something. You're directing the compiler. And the compiler says at interface. Okay, compiler is the beginning of the interface. At in. Okay, compiler, this is the end of the interface. That's all it means. And when we say at with string, so we say ns string at, so if I did this, I went, ns string, and I have to do, my string, strong, whatever, equals something, and I go here and I go at, b, whatever, and they're not the best syntax, but in fact it's all wrong here. The at symbol is taking that this is a string and use this string, and what did I do here? Oh, S spelled string wrong. Ring. NS, there's supposed to be an S in there. Oh, whatever. Anyway, you get the point. This is saying, I was just trying to demonstrate the at. This is why I don't type. I think it's because the keyboard's too small. I'm using these as loaner systems. Okay. And the keyboards do work. It's just me. The at symbol is saying, okay, compiler, this is a string. So we'll see, actually it's in the example here, we'll see the at, the string. So in the interface we have a beginning and then we have an end, and if we're going to define something it must come between the beginning and the end. And if you're going to wire components, you're going to wire it to the interface, which is the .h file. So if I click on the item and I drag it over here, I'm going to have a problem. If I press on the control button when I click on the item, I'm going to see, oops, this little blue line that shows up. If you're not getting the little blue line, you're not dragging. You're going to have a problem. So what I've done, just to reiterate the point, is I clicked on the item, I clicked the control button, and then I'm going to drag the item, so I'm going to see the little blue button, and I'm going to let go of everything. And this is going to hopefully automate my wiring. So I'm wiring the component the GUI component so that I can use it and reference it. So I'm going to call this here my label. And the type is called a UI label. It's the only thing it can be. And then we have the weak and the strong, and I'm not getting into that discussion, but remember that automatic and reference counting, yeah? Oh, how did I draw the line? I cancel this and do it again. Click on the item, so you know it's selected. On your keyboard, press the control button, hold it down, right mouse click and drag it, and you see it, hopefully. It's an outlet. It's an outlet. It's an output, outlet. Why do they call it an outlet? I don't know. We have IB actions, we have IB buttons, we have outlets, we have... Huh? You're not getting the little screen. Do you have the current version of Xcode? Huh. Is it, what do you get? Do you get just that? Oh, you have to let go. If you click on it and you get the, if you still have the blue line, you're still holding something. Let go of everything. Okay, hold on. I'm going to hold that thought for 1 second. Let me walk backwards. Hold on the control button. That is a blue line. But you know what? You're not in between. Let me see you at the very end, and I'll troubleshoot that for you. That is an odd situation. I want to say it's your mouse. Oh, you got it. You got it. You fixed your own problem.
Yeah, I was not. I can forget that.
So next week when we do this, we'll have you guys working on stuff, and then I won't have to interrupt everybody. I'll just go around individually to you guys as you're working. Another interesting point, you may have noticed, I have this little mouse I've got connected, and I believe your problem is associated with this. There's a right and a mouse button. You have to click the left, I'm sorry. You have to click the left mouse button when you drag it. You might be clicking the right mouse button if you're using the touchpad, which is why I have this external mouse, because now I can tell the difference between the buttons. And for me, for some strange reason, I never press the buttons right. It takes me 5 times to get it to work correctly. So you might want to invest in a little external mouse. It might make your life easier. Because you can, if that, you see the blue line, you've got a button pressed and you got the control pressed, but you got the wrong button pressed. Because you're supposed to be able to press, it's the selection, not the property. So you have to be able to press inside of the code, inside of that file, to drop it. Okay, so I'm going to, oh, I didn't do this, so I'm going to say my label. So now I have this thing called I have 2 properties now. Well, this is going to cause me a problem. Well, I have one capital and one lower. So I have multiple properties associated with the same one. What is a property? We have property and we have synthesize. And in the old days, it used to happen for us automatically. What is that? It's like a function or a prototype. And then we have, now we have to go back to Objective-C. This is really data. And we have methods that are controlling the data. And the methods fall into 2 categories. And really, this is a topic for next week. I'm kind of talking ahead a little bit. But we have these things called setters and getters, someone mentioned in the earlier class. Property and synthesize are automating the setter and getter concept for us. But let me save property and synthesize for you for the next week. Otherwise, I'm not going to make it through Hello World. Unfortunately, in some versions of Xcode, if you delete one of these suckers, you're going to get a really odd compiler error. And when you get that odd compiler error, you have to go up to Product and you have to select Clean and clean out your system because you've got, in this particular case, I had 2 of them. I deleted one. It's going to go, oh, where is it? It doesn't, a lot of stuff works in the background and it's not real time. So like garbage collection, as I mentioned earlier, it kind of goes through and sweeps out the memory. And when's it going to do it? Well, depends on when it does it as to in terms of what kind of odd problem you're going to have.
If you hit like undo, would that do it correctly?
No, you have to clean it. Once you do it, if you get an error message, just clean the project. It resets the memory for you. That's what that clean does. On the top over here, we have viewcontroller.h. And because they come in sets, we also have viewcontroller.m. So if I click on viewcontroller.m, I see the other side of things. In the .m, I've got, I think I'm going to have to finish this next week. I'm looking at the time. I've got some standard default, we'll finish this next week. In fact, we'll do something more sophisticated too. View did load, did receive memory warning, all sorts of different automated, this is stuff that was put in automatically. Each app has a life cycle. It's the load, the unload, the resume, the pause, and I'm going to have a special lecture and a special project that goes through all the different phases of the life cycle. So the life cycle of the program, in terms of the app that's running on the device, goes through, the first thing happens is, did the view load? These are just stages, if you think of this sort of like a life cycle, actually. It goes around in stages, and it might be paused, it might be resumed, it might be stopped, it might be unloaded. By default, the only ones that Xcode cares about are these two. In the old days, we used to have them all. And people went, what in the world do we do with all these things? Now the template just gives us two. View did load, which is the most important. Did the view load? Because this is like at the start of your application. If the view loaded, then do something. Greet the customer, do something. You can, a lot of people will add the view did unload, which is the counter, the opposite of this one, to make sure, and then put up that little, XIB file that we created earlier. Say, hey, sorry, on the view did unload. Oh, it unloaded for some reason. Put up that XIB file and say, hey, sorry, intermittent error. Did receive memory warning. Because if it received a memory warning, it means either that the garbage collector is not working fast enough for you, or you put too much stuff in memory and it just needs to slow down. So you can modify how the view is loading and how the app is running by controlling the memory component of it, which is kind of interesting. So dispose of any resources that can be recreated, make enough memory available, adjust things, which is what this is all about. So what I'm going to do, actually, because I'm looking at the time and I'm feeling pressured, what I'm going to do is finish this and leave you the tutorial and run through it real quickly next week, actually. But finish my discussion of Xcode and the model view controller just to make sure I've covered everything I wanted to with that. What we're going to do is control the view through the view controller, and this is where your Objective-C source code writing skills come into place. And if you take a look at that tutorial out here, I give you the code. So you cut and paste, and you stick the Objective-C code into the iOS app. As I mentioned earlier in the iOS class, the reason why I can teach two separate classes on pretty much the same topics is that one's focusing on writing the code, and one's focusing on building the apps and using the frameworks and the APIs and stuff. We're not writing that much code in this course. However, if you're taking the Objective-C class, and if you're not taking that class, watch the videos. You don't actually have to be here. Everything's recorded. You can watch the videos of that class. Anyway, long story short, you can probably by the end of the course, through osmosis, pick up a lot of the Objective-C programming, but I'm not going to cover, just to recap on the introduction of this course, I'm not going to cover too much of the syntax. Instead, we're going to do a lot of cutting and pasting. A lot of the examples I'm going to give you are going to be a cut and paste kind of thing. If you want to really learn the coding, you have to take the earlier class. But next week, I will be going through property and synthesize. Okay, so next week we're going to finish this app. We're going to go through property and synthesize, work on a more sophisticated app, have you do something on your own, hopefully, and also work with miscellaneous topics that I didn't cover tonight. And I have to go through my notes to see what I didn't cover. But in here you'll actually see the view did unload, view did load. So this is actually from an old template that was cut and pasted. if I took this and I put it into this one, I'm not going to have a problem. So as homework, for those of you who want to have homework, because everyone wants homework, finish this one. This one is called project number 1. Finish this one. That way, because I'm going to zip through it in a matter of 5 minutes next time. That way you'll have it built for you. Go through the website, find some of those books that you might like. I'm going to finish this PowerPoint next time, but I'm going to skip around in it. If you want, you could go through the rest of it on your own. This is the OC overview. If it's for those people who are new, because the entire week is going to go by before I see you again, you're going to lose everything. Some people are busy people and they want stuff to do. Review this on your own if you want. I'm going to eventually hit it, but I'm not going to hit it all next week. But I think most importantly is to go through and troubleshoot those little issues that you might have. In fact, his little, blue line issue and stuff like that. If you have questions, problems, and concerns, I am also available by email. So you can email. Did you have a question, or you just?
Yeah, that.
Yeah, this guy over here is. This one is under I know. Sometimes I go through kind of fast. Project 1. It's in the example projects. Actually, it's in the course. So if I go to the main directory out here, Spring 2000, click on the second box, iOS application development. Click on example projects, which is right here. Project number 1. That's the one. It's, yes?
Could you just elaborate on what you mean specifically by finished project?
Do it. Go through all the steps. I've gotten through maybe about the first 2 steps. What I mean by finish a product is actually if you look at the bottom of the downloaded file, you'll see the finish app says Hello World. So we're gonna, in this project, you create an app that puts a button and a label that we've actually got started. You can take, if you've been following along, you take what we've got started. Follow through, I want to say step number 3 or something. 3 or 4, you have to do the action, the label, the action. You may or you may not get through it. If you don't get through it, don't worry about it. I'm going to do it again. I'm going to do it again from the beginning next week. I'm just not going to spend too much time on it because I've already talked through most of it. But it creates an app where you press a button. The only thing that happens is you come up with a button and a label. It says hello, and you press the button and then it says world or something. Just changes the label. And what this app is meant to do is to show you how to put something together. It's a hello world app, essentially. You're putting a button, you're putting a label on there. It emphasizes the property and the synthesize, which is I need to finish. I need to finish that next week for you guys. And then it also emphasizes, the view controllers with the XIB file and the way that the project is put together. I'm pretty sure the code will work, but if you have problems with the code, don't worry about it. We can troubleshoot it. Because what's going to end up happening next week is you'll have some individual time. So save up your questions. Because I'm not going to talk as long next week. Instead, I'm going to go through this one. I'm going to hit another one, probably. No lecture stuff. I'm going to give you something to do, and I'm going to walk around and see if you can do it. Because then that tells me what I need to focus on. Where I see people having problems, it also helps me kind of get the feel for the group and who needs help with what. And then save up your questions, because when you get me, it's your opportunity to ask me a bunch of questions. Like, how come this line's not working, and how come that's not working? And then I can show you all this stuff. It's a lot faster than an email sometimes as well. Questions, comments, or concerns? It's already 8:45. I don't know what happened to the time. I think it's because we got a late start today.
Your email and everything is on your website?
It is, actually. It should be on the Meetup group website. If not, it is, where is it? Not on here. Here, I'll just bring it up this way. Here's my email address, bhecker at, I'll make it bigger. Oh, there it is. That's kind of big. It's kind of underlined weird too. Let's see. bhacker@itu.edu. If you have questions for the meetup people, if you have questions about the enrollment, obligations, commitments, you're afraid to get into a program, I can answer those questions. I don't know. If you're not interested in iPhone and you want to hit up the Android stuff on the 19th, I have only problem with the 19th is you can't spend all day unless you enroll. You can go up till about noon, I think, is when they're going to cut you off. It's not me, it's the university. It's the fact that we have to pay the bills to have the aircon and the lighting and the internet working. So we can't give everything away for free. But also, every month from the new pattern for 2013, there's going to be one free workshop offered. So it'll be from like 4 to 6 hours, maybe. So it's substantial, but it'll be free. So if your money's the issue, you can always, once a month, there's going to be a free one. It's going to be special topics though, so it's not going to be like all inclusive, like this is how you program the iPhone. It's going to be more like using web services, or using this, or using that. It's special topic stuff, so a lot of people that are taking the other workshops might be interested in the special, just dedicate some time to a special framework or something.
And this class is now every Monday for the next 4
5
Mondays?
weeks. Yeah, next four more Mondays from now. Yeah.
And if you want to take this class, it's the $2.99?
Yeah.
You fill out that form
And you can fill out the form and bring it next week if you're still sitting on the fence. I'll take it next week. I can't let you sit through all of next week though, because it cuts. Anyway, yeah. All right, we're done. Let me stop this capture.